Can you remember a time when you could light a cigarette anywhere in a hospital waiting room, on a plane, even in your office? The click of a lighter, the soft swirl of smoke drifting through the air, and nobody even flinched. Rows of orange plastic chairs, ashtrays on every table, the faint smell of tobacco hanging like a curtain. That was just normal life. On planes, pilots and passengers lit up together. In hospitals, nurses stepped in to empty the ashtrays by your bedside. In offices, smoke marked the rhythm of the workday. This wasn't unusual. It was everywhere, shaping how Americans lived, worked, and even waited. Welcome to Golden Days, USA, where we step back into the air you used to breathe. There was a particular quality to the air in those spaces. Not just the smell, though, that was unmistakable, but the way light moved through it. In an office building late in the afternoon, when the sun came through the windows at a low angle, you could see the slow drift of smoke like weather moving through a valley. Blue-gray currents rising from ashtrays on every desk, pooling near the ceiling tiles, settling into the fabric of everything. You learned to read rooms by the haze. A heavy meeting left its mark. A productive morning had a certain thickness by lunch. And stepping outside at 5 o'clock, the first breath of evening air felt almost sharp by comparison, clean in a way you didn't fully appreciate until you were standing in it. This wasn't something anyone questioned. It was simply the atmosphere of American life, the texture of hospitals and waiting rooms, airplanes and conference rooms, diners and department stores. Smoke was the weather indoors. It became part of everything so gradually that nobody could quite remember when it started. Smoking was what people did. Doctors did it between patients, nurses did it at the station, pilots did it in the cockpit, and passengers lit up the moment the seatbelt sign went dark. It was how you passed time, how you steadied nerves, how you signaled that a conversation was beginning or ending. And because everyone trusted the rhythm of it, because it had always been there, nobody thought to wonder if there might come a day when all of it would simply disappear. Think about walking through an airport terminal. The carpet was that particular shade of industrial burgundy, worn thin near the gates, and every few rows of seating had its own standing ashtray, those tall chrome columns with the weighted base and the notched rim where you could rest a cigarette while you read the paper. You didn't even have to be a smoker to know the ritual. You watched it happen all around you, the small choreography of packs being tapped against palms, the practiced flip of a book of matches, the way strangers sometimes nodded at each other over a shared light like brief acquaintances in a private club. On the plane itself, things got even more intimate. The armrests had ashtrays built right in little rectangular compartments with hinged metal lids that clicked open when you pressed them. Rows 9 through 23 might be designated smoking, and the only barrier between you and the non-smoking section was a few feet of cabin air and the general faith that smoke respected boundaries. Flight attendants walked the aisle with trays of complimentary cigarettes for anyone who wanted them. This wasn't unusual. This was hospitality. And here's what you might not remember unless you sat in one of those seats yourself, the strange intimacy of watching the person beside you light up just as the plane lifted off, the way that small ritual seemed to mark the beginning of something, a suspension of ordinary time. Did you ever fly in those smoking sections? Was there a particular flight you remember, somewhere you were going, someone you were going to see? In hospitals, it was even more ordinary. Waiting rooms had ashtrays on the end tables next to the magazines. Patients recovering from surgery smoked in their beds, with nurses stopping in to empty the little tin trays attached to the bedside rails. Doctors stood in hallways, lab coats on, stethoscopes around their necks, cigarettes in hand, discussing cases with colleagues. There was something almost ceremonial about it in those settings. A cigarette offered calm. It structured time when time felt unbearable, those long hours waiting for news. The slow recovery afternoons when nothing happened except the light moving across the wall. Smoking gave shape to formless stretches of worry. And nobody, not the patients, not the families, not the staff, thought twice about the fact that this was happening in a place dedicated to healing. That disconnect simply didn't register. It was normal, the way everything normal eventually becomes invisible. Office life may have been where smoking was most deeply woven into the rhythm of work itself. Think about a desk in any city office building. There was the blotter, the telephone, the stack of folders, and somewhere within reach, always within reach, an ashtray. Maybe glass, maybe ceramic, maybe something promotional with a company logo stamped on the bottom. Some were clean and barely used. Others told stories in layers of residue that nobody ever fully scrubbed away. Meetings ran on smoke. Someone would push back from the conference table, light one, and the conversation would shift, loosen, become more candid. People made decisions surrounded by the slow spiral of exhaled thought. It wasn't just tolerated, it was expected. To not smoke in certain rooms might have felt almost impolite, like refusing coffee. And then there was the unspoken geography of it. You learned which colleagues kept better brands in their desk drawers. You knew whose lighter always worked. There were informal networks built on borrowed cigarettes, on stepping out together to the stairwell or the loading dock when the afternoon dragged. Some of the most important conversations in American business happened in those smoke-filled margins of the workday. The change didn't happen all at once. It crept in so slowly that for a while you could almost pretend it wasn't coming. First it was the hospitals, then the airplanes, then, one by one, the offices. Ashtrays disappeared from waiting rooms. Those chrome columns vanished from airport terminals. The little hinged compartments in airplane armrests were sealed shut, then redesigned entirely. Where there had once been smoke, there was suddenly just air. Some people barely noticed. Others felt a small grief they couldn't quite name, not for the cigarettes themselves necessarily, but for the rituals, the rhythms, the way time had been organized by that simple, repeated gesture. Light, draw, exhale, wait, repeat. It had been a kind of punctuation, and when it was gone, something about the pace of life felt different. Faster, maybe. Less marked. The spaces where people used to pause now simply moved forward without stopping. This isn't about whether things changed for the better. That's not what these memories are for. What matters is that a whole texture of American life, an entire sensory landscape, exists now only in the minds of the people who lived through it. The smell of a hospital waiting room, the haze in a conference room after a long meeting, the way a stranger's lighter across the aisle meant you weren't quite alone on a long flight. These were small things, but small things, woven together across thousands of days, become the fabric of an era, and when they disappear, they take something with them that's hard to explain to anyone who wasn't there. You were there. You remember the weight of that air, the rituals nobody taught you, the world before it changed. If these memories brought something back, we hope you'll like this video and subscribe to Golden Days USA. More stories like this are waiting here. And we wonder, what's the one place you remember most clearly, where everyone smoked and nobody thought twice? That place is gone now, but somewhere inside you the air still carries the memory.